discussion. The fact that that places like Haiti have massive influx of COVID.
Just continue.
The hospitals are already full of people broken and messed up from the earthquake and the floods. So they're not having a place to go home, and now they're getting hit with the COVID as well. So
Very much did.
keep Haiti in your prayers.
Paul, I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody, and then I'll ask that you go ahead and unmute, okay?
All right. Thank you, Deb. Thank you for organizing and keeping us going here. I do, yeah, besides Haiti as a place that we need to be remembering and in our prayers, the news this evening that my little hometown of Lamona, Iowa is no longer able to allow people into the old folks care facility because they've gotten COVID transmission there. That for me is a matter of some personal concern because we have friends there, of course. And I do want to mention my sweet wife. Her family has in the last 3 weeks lost 7 people, 6 of them to COVID. All of those in Polynesia, or actually one of them in Kansas City, but the rest of them in Polynesia. And this last week to lose her nephew and then her younger sister, whose son it was, died the following day. And her husband is in the hospital with COVID, and that whole family is infected. And so we're prayerful concern for her family, the Falora family in particular.
And Yanko.
And yeah, that's her sister was married to
Yanko.
what's his first name? Sylvain Yanko, Chinese name. But it's interesting that her family has had people married to the French, to the Germans, the Chinese, to the Austral Islanders, to Fiji. There's 10 kids. There were 10 kids in the family. And of course, Rena is married to somebody in the United
There's
States.
5 of us left now.
Yeah, and so now there's only 2 of the girls left, and so the family's going to lose him pretty fast. But then on the other hand, we've been blessed with some remarkable good blessings. Our son just turned 36, and so we had a happy celebration for him. And Sunday, we had the privilege of going to St. Joe to bless the 1-year-old baby that joined us on the Zoomathon last year at 9 days old. Little April Johnson was blessed. Her parents asked for it, even though they are not associated with any religious denomination, nor are their parents. And so to be able to have the non-church families reaching out to have blessings for their children is, as far as I'm concerned, a real blessing and delight. Our speaker this evening is David Reed, and he's been with us once previously. I do want to go to the screen share and bring him in. And hopefully this will work. Okay, do I have David Reed's picture in front of you?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, you can see that he is the author of Nephites in America and Face of a Nephite. He is a patent lawyer and a judge whose research on DNA evidence related to the Book of Mormon was previously presented on our forum. His presentation tonight is supported by Digital Legends. I saw that Boyd Tucker had advertised for him, and so I presume some of these people whose names I don't recognize are from that persuasion, and we'd like to welcome you this evening to the Book of Mormon Perspectives Forum. You're welcome to join us for any sessions that you're interested in, and if you'd like to get my email and get on the mailing list, that would be welcome as well. David Reed's presentation this evening is on 4 ceremonial centers, and I'm sure that will stir some controversy because he tends to see cities where anthropologists are seeing ceremonial centers. And that distinction may apply to our understanding of the Book of Mormon sites, which clearly are contemporary with the ones he's going to be presenting primarily in Ohio. And highlighting those sites certainly helps us to see what was going on in the Book of Mormon times, and therefore merits our careful attention. Join me in prayer, if you would please. Loving God, Master of the universe, awesome creator of all good things we comprehend, we approach your throne of grace to ask your blessing on our Zoom gathering. For your blessings of patience and grace are the ones upon which we have come to depend. We honor you for the masterpiece you make every day in our microcosm of creation, and for your word in scripture somehow surviving from the divine through human translation. And we appreciate your kindness to lead us through the chronic turmoil of our disasters, including COVID, and the foresight to provide prophets inspired to be accurate forecasters. But when we see the dawning after darkness, when we see the mildness after harshness, forgiveness, whether yours or ours alone, we see your annealing love transforming our mistakes to us so alarming, nurturing lies, producing good seeds grown. We are amazed to discover your power evident to us every hour, evident in our community and to us alone. This evening, we ask your blessing, especially on our presenter, David Reed, who clearly comes to share the harvest of good seed, and whose controversial contribution will move us toward resolution as we study, engage our faith, and examine our needs. Give us patience for the long haul as we embrace your cause of Zion call, and courage enough to face this age of COVID, division, war, and rage, sufficient to play a role as your will succeeds. You have called us to extend your hands here at home and in all other lands, to bless and lift up souls to eternity. And yet we disagree and forget to bow the knee, as we bow, professing allegiance to our own demands. So this evening be with us as we contemplate and discuss the heritage we have, so much unknown, so much history to amend. Help us see the trajectory through which your cause is able to transcend. In Jesus' name, amen. David Reed, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Paul, and thanks for setting this up and arranging to have it recorded. Thanks for everyone for showing up. Before I go into the presentation, let me just share a couple of minutes about myself. So as he indicated, I am a lawyer and an administrative law judge. I'm an independent researcher related to Book of Mormon issues that have been of interest to me. In the last few years in particular, I was focused on DNA issues. I was interested in finding out for myself whether DNA evidence would be consistent with the Book of Mormon or not. And I did a presentation related to that a year ago, which it would be in the video files we could get but then it was also, I put into a book, as he indicated, Face of a Nephite. And that is with Digital Legend. It doesn't really show up with the screen thing here, but yeah, Face of a Nephite. There it goes, briefly. But and that's related to the DNA side, and I won't get into that. But what I found through that research, in my opinion, was that the DNA evidence was consistent with possibly supporting either of the two main theories. In terms of the Mesoamerican theory, I did find there was evidence of a small amount of DNA that would be consistent with a Mediterranean potential Israelite kind of DNA, slightly above what would have been expected to have come over after Columbus. And at the same time, that was only a small amount. If it was in the Mesoamerican setting, it would have been a small group, and where the DNA signal was mostly lost, but there did seem to be small amounts of DNA there. For me, the greater evidence was more consistent with the Heartland theory, which was that, in my opinion, the haplogroup X DNA, but not just that. There was also additional Y chromosome DNA that corroborated, and there was also blood type evidence that FIT2 all supported the potential non-Asian ancestry significant amount that was in North America. So, and that's in that face of a Nephite book, which can be through digital legends. So since doing that, that sparked my curiosity into looking at the archaeological evidence in North America. And I'll admit I'm relatively early in that process. Over this last year in particular, I've been focusing on that. And in this presentation, I'll present 4 of the main suspects, so to speak. That would be Book of Mormon time frame in North America, looking at that theory, and we'll talk about what I see there. So, all right, so let me go ahead and share the screen, and we'll start the slides. There are about 40 slides, and hopefully we'll get through that and then have some time for questions afterwards. Okay. All right, does everybody see the full screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so as Paul indicated, the 4 sites that I'm going to look at are traditionally considered ceremonial type sites. In my opinion, they are cities, and I'll talk about why I feel that. And we'll go into them one by one. So these are the 4 sites that I'll look at. And in my view, it's sort of a crescendo, meaning the best will be last. But the first of them will be the Pinson Mound site, which is in West Tennessee. The second will be the Poverty Point site, which is northern Louisiana, northeastern Louisiana. The third site will be Fort Ancient, which is near Cincinnati. And then looks like the number 4 is missing there. The Hopewell Mound Group site, which is one of a number of sites near Chillicothe, Ohio. Okay. Okay, so looking first at Pinson Mounds, it's located between Nashville and Memphis in Tennessee, sort of near Jackson, Tennessee. It's this here, and a lot of these will be, it's a little bit like a slideshow, so there are a fair number of pictures. Obviously the presentation will be recorded, so you'll be able to take a look at them more closely later if needed. So at Pinson Mounds, this is the large central mound found on the site. On the bottom right of the screen is the picture of the sign that goes with it. As indicated, it's a mound that's 72 feet tall, and has, instead of being a typical conical mound that's round at the bottom, has 4 corners which line up with the north, south, east, west, the cardinal directions. And as indicated there, the time frame that's considered for it fits with the Book of Mormon time frame, sort of in the 1 to 300 AD, or in other spots it'll say 200 BC to 500 AD, kind of on the general time frame of this site. Okay, so just taking a look at some of the text on this one. So this was a large populated site. It was it extends over 400 acres. It's a very large site. There are a number of documented habitation areas on the site, although scientists generally contend that maybe those weren't permanent habitations, and they instead considered a regional gathering places for ceremonies or trading. There's clearly evidence to show that it was a regional gathering place and that there was trading going on, likely ceremonies, but there are, in addition, evidence of habitation as well. It's right next to a river, and there are as many as 30 mounds on the site. And I'll go over the layout of the site in just a second. As indicated, the radiocarbon dating dates it to the right time frame. And we already just took a look at the Saul's Mound, which is the second tallest Native American mound. It also has a lot of burial mounds and rectangular platforms. Okay, so on this slide, on the left at the bottom is the layout for the site. And the very large mound that we just saw is Mound 9, Saul's Mound. It's right in the center of it. There are also 4 rectangular platform mounds, which are considered to likely have been sort of maybe ceremonial maybe games on them, whatever. And then there are other mounds that include burial mounds and so forth. There's also an area sort of around Mound 29. It's an earthen wall that makes sort of a C shape there. And then the map on the right, I also included. This is a 1922 map, and it has the additional projection of a wall going almost entirely around the site, and including an interior wall going around the Saul's Mound. This was largely projected, but was based off of traces of breastworks that were found in the 1800s. And this individual, William Meyer, in talking with old settlers and tracing the breastwork, found that there was likely a fence going all the way around this huge site. And then parts of it are projected there. Okay. Now this is like a minute 40 seconds. Hopefully the volume will come through for you. Just kind of give a little bit about the mounds, builders, and that Native American population there. So. Hopefully it'll come through. If not, it's not critical.
Across North America, indigenous cultures built large mounds for ceremonial and practical purposes. They date as far back as before the time of the Greek and Roman civilizations up to the time of European contact with the Americas. Many dozens of these mounds have survived at sites in the United States and Canada. Mounds such as these showcase the knowledge, creativity, skill, and determination of the native tribes who planned and built them throughout the centuries. Pinson Mound State Archaeological Park near Jackson, Tennessee, contains one of the largest collections of mounds spread across the largest area. 17 mounds are spread over 500 acres. Native tribes constructed these mounds at different times over a period of several hundred years, from about 200 BC to 500 AD. Trees have grown up on and around the mounds, which makes some of them hard to see. A few of the mounds were used as burial sites, but most of them appear to have served ceremonial purposes. The mounds are arranged in such a way as to highlight astronomical observations, particularly the spring equinox and the fall equinox. Artifacts found at the site suggest that visitors came to this location from as far away as the modern states of Georgia and Louisiana to participate in rituals. The tallest mound, known as Saul's Mound, is 72 feet high. Workers carried basketful after basketful of dirt and carefully piled it together to build the mound. Pinson Mounds has hiking trails that allow you to explore the area. The Park Museum features artifacts discovered at the site and information about the culture of the people who built and used the mounds.
Okay, and so then I'm going to just do a few more slides with some of the artifacts that have been found there. This one, obviously a lot of projectile points, arrowheads, spearheads, a lot of tools, fish hooks, axes, other kinds of things. A lot of it done with rock. Has been some done with copper as well. So on the right there is an example of one of the worked copper design kind of pieces. Here are some of the other things, and these are located in the museum there. So on the top left was an interesting, got an interesting design. Looking at the individual on it, looked like he was wearing sort of like a loincloth kind of thing. Can you see the mouse, by the way, when I move it, or
Yes.
Was that yes or no?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. So I can help point a little bit with it. Good.
Yeah.
And yeah, so in his left arm, he had some kind of a weapon, and then in the right, some kind of decorative, I'm not sure what you would call it, maybe a scepter or something. Many of the skeletons would have these kind of, in the center of the slide, these copper ear spools, and you've probably seen people that have those earlobe expanders kind of things. They apparently that was a thing for this particular group. They would do that. On the left side, it just had a number of examples of non-local items as indicated from Gulf of Mexico, Appalachian Mountains, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, also copper from the Great Lakes area. On the right side of the screen, this was sort of interesting. There was in one of the burial mounds, the individual had on the kneecaps these two things which were made out of human skull bone, so taken off the skull cap, and then decorated it with these designs. And it had little rattles with it so that it would make noise as well. Interesting on the designs, it's got these sort of star-shaped things, which are kind of like a square with lines through them. And it makes me wonder whether those may be reflective or emblematic of the rectangular mounds on the site that line up with the cardinal directions. Down at the bottom, these clay cooking balls, which will also show up in the next site at Poverty Point, and I'll talk about those a little bit more. Okay, so Pinson Mounds is the largest in terms of size archaeological site in North America that fits that Book of Mormon time frame. It has on here information about the skeletons that were recovered, as indicated in that third paragraph there. One of the things they found is that they did wear fibers, so it wasn't just like an animal loincloth or anything like that. They had fiber headdresses. So they, even though the fiber would deteriorate, there were parts where it'd be like stuck to copper or something, and they could tell that they did have fibers that they worked with as well. There were a few other artifacts recovered, like they used mica as a mirror. So there's like what they considered a small mica mirror and other things. And then the other paragraph refers to, again, the various areas geographically that they connected with. And this comes from the Tennessee Encyclopedia there. All right, so now let's briefly talk about the second site. This is Poverty Point, Louisiana. And we'll see other versions of the site again. Okay, so Poverty Point is located in northern Louisiana, sort of near the Mississippi River, across from Mississippi, south of Arkansas. It's actually located 15 miles west of the Mississippi River's current flow, but it's on the edge of the Mississippi River floodplain. So right now the Mississippi River is contained by levees that were built in the 1800s to contain the flow where it was, but there was a very large floodplain, and where the site is located is on a ridge that rises about 15 to 20 feet above the floodplain. On the left of the slide are a couple of pictures of the signs that were from the site when I visited, as indicated in this one on the left. The Mississippi River was likely closer at this time and likely had formed a shallow backwater lake between the site and where the Mississippi River is now. So it was a nice site for swimming, bathing, fishing, that kind of activity. All right, and then on this site, there are C-shaped, shaped like the semicircle ridges, and these are very large. So this is also a 400-acre site. I know the video called Pinson Mounds 500-acre, but it's actually 400 acres, and that confirms that at the museums. And this one at Poverty Point was also 400 acres in size. So just to give you an idea of how big this is, this little area covered in the semicircle was 37 acres in size here. And each of these ridges was several feet high, 20 feet wide, and about 50 feet between them. It's the size is so big that when you're there, it's hard to grasp visually until you get used to the dimensions of just how big the place is. Now, this site also has a very large mound called Mound A. It's also 72 feet tall, just like the one at the Pinson Mound site. It's the second biggest mound in volume besides Monk's Mound at Cahokia. Now, I have not covered Cahokia in these slides because Cahokia doesn't date to the right time frame. Cahokia is a big site near St. Louis. It dates much later, more like 1000 AD, 1200 AD, that kind of time frame, and was a big city, Native American city, but it doesn't date to the right time frame. But outside of Cahokia, this is the largest mound. They think that it was built in 3 stages with a big conical mound and then spread out, but most of it was done in a single massive effort. And they think that because they can tell where they got the soil from, and when they dug down into the mound based off of lack of erosion and so forth, they think that most of it was done within a single 3-month period, single season. And when you think about that, it would have involved millions of loads, which to me implies thousands of workers. So just taking a look back at the site again, the ridges at the site are now mostly mowed over, and they had been plowed as farmland for so many years that in the areas where they're plowed, you can't see them except they do some decorative mowings so you can sort of imagine them. Over on this back part of the site, there are some old woods. And when you go into those woods, they're kind of pictured with the woods over here, you can see the mound, you can see the ridges that were formed. This here at the top is the large, what the large mound looks like. It was built as a conical mound and then sort of into what they call a T-shaped or potentially a bird shape. They aren't quite sure. Over on the left is a possible projection of what it may look like. Obviously, this walkway is newly built. It is not ancient. All right, now these diagrams down here come from the museum at the site, and what they show is that when the archaeologists have looked at the ridges, what they found was, first of all, they found evidence of habitation housing on the ridges. And then they also found that it was sort of a segregated society, or at least designated areas for their society, because like with the ridges over on the right, is where they found all of the the women's cooking tools, the culinary tools, whereas over on these ridges over here, they found all of these hunting and domestic other kinds of tools. So they have sort of segregated parts of what I call a city where the groups did different kinds of work. Okay, oh, and I should go back just time frame wise. Scientists estimate this as 1700 BC to 1100 BC. So if that radiocarbon dating is correct, that would fit a Jaredite time frame, not a Lamanite Nephite kind of time frame in terms of the Book of Mormon. Okay, so here are some of the types of artifacts that have been found there. You'll notice some of these were polished and quite nice. All of these things were clay balls that were used with cooking. So it appears the way they would do a lot of the cooking is they dig a hole in the ground, they would start a fire in there. Instead of rocks, they would use, because a Poverty Point site has almost no rocks. But anyway, they'd use these clay kind of balls, and they would use those to sort of heat up, and then they'd use those balls to then heat other items. And as I indicated, not only are these found at Poverty Point, they're also found at the Pinson Mound site, but not with all the same decorations. And then a bunch of projectile points there. The bottom center gives you just an idea of just how many artifacts are lots. So like over 11,000 projectile points have been found just at this one site. The top left, these are plummets that appear to, again, very well polished, shined, very smooth. They appear to have been used for like nets, for netting, fishing, that kind of thing. Lots of tools. They did work with copper, including making decorative items, potentially tools, kind of things with some of the copper. All right, now the next 2 slides are sort of a couple of my personal theories on the site. One of my first theories is that I think that the age for the poverty point is incorrect. Now, again, even if it fits the older time frame and the radiocarbon dating is right, that would still fit a jaredite time frame, which is fine. But there are a couple of things that lead me to think that it is connected with the Pinson Mountain site and the other two sites that we'll talk about later, in that there are some very common things about them. And these other sites, all the radiocarbon dating, all dated to that 200 BC to 400 AD timeframe. So we'll talk about that with the Pinson Mounds, the Fort Ancient site, the Chillicothe areas. Also, there's another site in Louisiana called Marksville, which had a similar C-shaped ridge around the large plaza, sort of like the Poverty Point site does. And that also tested to the 200 BC to 400 AD timeframe. Some of them would be like 0 to 200, but they're all within that time frame. Now, some people might say, well, how did the radiocarbon dating be wrong? What I found through the DNA research is that that happens sometimes. It's sort of like with COVID testing, where sometimes you just get false positives or things that will distort the results, which is why they will often do multiple tests if they have, and sometimes, especially if the first test comes back with something questionable. The reason that carbon dating can get distorted is due to the surroundings. When there's interaction with whatever it is you test, if there's interaction with things that have either a lower carbon content or a higher carbon content, that can affect the dating of the item that's tested. So items that have interaction with low carbon water are sites where you can get artificial aging and have things test as older than they are. Anyway, like I said, this is just a theory of mine. A couple other things about it, again, in relation to the Pinson Mound site, I think it's more than a coincidence that the mounds at both sites, the large mounds, is exactly 72 feet tall. And I think it's also not a coincidence that both sites were at 400 acres. There are other things like, again, like not just the clay balls, but there are some artifacts from the one site that relate to the other, which to me indicate that they likely were occupied in overlapping timeframes. Okay, so anyway, that was my theory there. And then this is an even more speculative theory, and then we'll go on to the next slide. Okay, so the Poverty Point site is interesting to me, and if it does relate to this more recent time frame like the other sites. I want to focus first on the far left. So in ancient Jerusalem around Lehi's time frame, there's a question of where Solomon's temple was. There are some that feel it was located here in front of Mount Moriah, which is also called the Temple Mount. Now here is the topographical kind of map for ancient Jerusalem, with the ridges showing the changes in elevation. So Jerusalem was built on an elevated hilltop ridge with steep slopes around the side. On the south of Jerusalem was the Pool of Siloam, which was connected to the Gihon Spring. And it was made for a fresh water spot where when people would come to Jerusalem, they would come in, they could clean off there in the pool. And then if they were to proceed to the temple, you would go up through the habitation area as they ascend through the city of David. And then here is the one potential site for the Solomon's temple, which some feel was on an elevated rectangular platform here, just before the Temple Mount. Now, probably the majority, most, and have a different view, and they think the Solomon Temple may have been on top of the Temple Mount. This is where the Dome of the Rock is, which would place it on top of the Mount Moriah here. But Kay Godfrey has done a recent presentation. Some of you may know who he was. And he goes into the evidence of why he feels like Solomon's Temple the evidence for why he feels it was located here. But anyway, if it was located here, the Poverty Point site actually kind of has a similar type of layout, with the water then rising to going through the habitation areas and going to the elevated rectangular platform up to it right in front of the mound setting, which one theory would be to replicate the setting that was back in Jerusalem. So obviously that's just my own theory, but then we'll go on to the next site. Okay, so the next one is Fort Ancient. Fort Ancient is a really interesting site. It's located northeast of Cincinnati, sort of like Jerusalem, which was on a hilltop enclosure. Fort Ancient is a relatively flat top next to a steep sided hill. Next to Fort Ancient is next to a river, the Little Miami River, and then it has a wall going around it. And of course, Jerusalem had a wall going around it, but that was stone. Now it's, like I said, northeast of Cincinnati. All right. So the walls were earthen walls, and they're built up. And when it was first discovered, everyone assumed that the walls were for fortification, defensive purposes. I'll go into the predominant theory now is that they're not. I do think it was for fortification purposes. In parts, it's very tall, up to 20 feet tall. It's especially tall in the places where the area next to it, there wasn't the steep slope. And the parts of it that were right next to a steep slope, then the walls didn't need to be very tall and were maybe only 5-6 feet tall at those spots, but got up very tall in others. Over here on the right is an example of an entrance between the walls that were built. It's a large site. This one encloses over 100 acres. So the walls going around are 3.5 miles to get around it. So that's discussed here. So yeah, the mall's 3.5 miles. I have the height, the age, the radiocarbon dating fits that same 200 BC to 400 AD kind of time frame. And again, it was considered a large fort or fortified city at first. Now, as Paul has indicated, the predominant theories now are that the ancient Native Americans in the area didn't have cities. They deny the existence of cities. I think that is a mistake. Let me show a couple of things about this site that again convinced me that it was a city and it was a fortified city. One is, I'll get into talking about the ancient, that they showed that had consistent crops and gardens that were kept there. And then also in terms of the walls, I put in this paragraph so that when the scientists say, oh, we don't think those are fortifications, the two main arguments that they use are that one, the borrow pits for the walls, the ditches were on the inside rather than the outside. And so they say, well, they think it would have been a better defensive benefit if the ditches had been on the outside of the walls. But to me, that's easily explained in that either one, there's not all that much difference in benefit, or two, if there's an exterior threat, it would make sense to do what you can safely, which would be to build the walls from the inside rather than being exposed to the outside while you're building the walls. And then the other thing that they point to is that in the 3.5 miles of walls going around it, there are a total of 84 gateways, breaks. And they say that that doesn't make sense. That would be hard to defend. But to me, that can be easily explained with, if you think of a Book of Mormon setting, like where they built the walls in Alma in a time of war and then had a long period of sustained peace, it would make sense to dig out some gateways, more gateways to make the city more accessible and for people to come in and out more easily once you have a sustained period of peace. There's no evidence that the gateways were always there from the initial time of the building. Okay, and then last, in terms of the city, again, the amount of earth in those surrounding walls, 3.5 miles around, is so large, 15 million cubic feet of earth, that it would have required either thousands of workers working, or it would have had to have been spread across decades or perhaps even hundreds of years. And unfortunately, that's the way the scientists are kind of tend to be leading, because they don't want to accept the idea of it being a city. They tend to say, well, it must have taken decades or perhaps even hundreds of years to do, which to me is even more fantastical of a proposition, to imagine many generations of people, many decades to do that work for, to me, an unclear benefit. Okay. Okay, so then just looking at a few of the things from the site. Again, some of these are pulled from the museum, some from other pictures. On the left, these are the types of houses, huts that appear to have been used on the site and in Hopewell times, sort of framed by, imagine thin young trees of several 4 to 6 inches kind of diameter, and you bend them over to make sort of an oval frame, and then they cover it over, and then holes at the top so you can have fires inside and the smoke to escape. So these are sort of domed huts, is the types of place that they think that they lived in. Here's some examples of copper artifacts found there, lots of projectile points and things like that, the typical kinds of discoveries you get for Native American areas. Now I'm going to talk with 2 slides about the interesting crop that are found, is particularly at the Fort Ancient site, but actually all through this multi-state Hopewell area. They call it the Eastern Agricultural Complex. And when they've looked at that, these areas, they find that for this whole multi-state area here, there were similar diet and similar crops that were grown. And principal crops, as it says in the second paragraph there, included goosefoot, which, and by the way, a couple of these are just now basically considered weeds, because there are no domesticated varieties left. In other words, once the Hopewell stopped growing these in a domesticated form, they just basically reverted to wild and are mostly considered weeds. But goosefoot is a cousin of quinoa. Erect knotweed is a cousin of buckwheat. And then also the things that they grew in these large in these gardens, and including fields, included sunflower seeds, squash, maygrass seeds, and little barley. Now, maize was not used as a predominant crop. They found a small amount, but not much. Maize was not a predominant crop among Native Americans in this northeastern North America area until long after Book of Mormon timeframes. Like Cahokia timeframe, that was maize at that point. Obviously, maize was used down in Mesoamerica at this time, but not in this Midwestern Heartland kind of area. And there are a couple of sites there related to this plant cultivation, and then some quotes from those citations. So one thing is about the goosefoot, which is the cousin of quinoa. It's actually really interesting when they looked at, and they found storage pits of like tens of thousands of these kinds of goosefoot seeds that somebody had stored as a food. And when they looked at these, they found that there are domesticated varieties that with thinner skins, larger seeds, so it's better for human consumption. And what they found in testing out this goosefoot that actually produces comparable harvests to what you can do with quinoa or major agricultural crops, it could produce over 1,000 pounds of edible seed per acre. And then you could also eat the leaves like a spinach. And so anyway, again, from this citation, this McLaughlin site, which was on the previous slide, let me go back. So this one down here, which is again, it's a peer-reviewed magazine. All right. So it indicates they began approximately 100 BC to build earthen walls that enclose Fort Ancient and the ponds that are immediately inside the walls. It mentions that archaeological work reveals that the ponds at Fort Ancient were deliberately constructed to hold water. all of it ceased around 400 AD. So that all kind of sort of fits the Book of Mormon type general layout. That shows when they did, again, they found these seeds. Some were found in concentrations, it says, and numbered as in tens of thousands or millions in storage pits. They had large fields of these plants growing near the Hopewell earthworks. And when they looked at the ragweed pollen percentages, they found that you would get equivalent amounts to what you get with Eastern, the European style agriculture, where you're annually plowing the soil, which again implies large crops. Domesticated shows a sophistication, shows a permanence or a habitation there. So again, that's one of the pieces of evidence towards that being a city. And pictures of the quinoa and goosefoot. This is a couple of things that were at Fort Ancient, a mound with a stone covering and burial mounds there. All right, now we'll look at the last site. And let me just check time-wise. Okay, I think we'll be okay. All right, so now I want to talk about Hopewell Mound Group. This is in the Chillicothe area. There are actually a number of sites in the Chillicothe area. Hopewell Mound Group is one of the sites. It's kind of a biggest feature site. Chillicothe is about an hour south of Columbus, Ohio. Down there on the bottom left, if you go to the site, you look out in the field, you can hardly see anything there now because of the many decades of plowing. You can still see a little bit of a large triple mound that was on the site. If you go, it extends into woods, and if you go into the woods, you can see this is an example of part of the earthen wall. Sorry, this was actually up here in the woods. You can see the earthen walls are several feet tall that at once extended all the way around. Okay. The site, Hopewell Mound Group site, is a very large site also, 130 acres enclosed. So to get around it, the wall is 2 miles long to encompass the site. The large triple mound on the site, the one that was sort of in the D-shaped, hold on. It looked like this. There was sort of this D-shaped, large, and then there was this triple mound here. Okay, so the triple mound was 500 feet long, 100 feet wide, 30 feet tall. And there are signs of inhabitation at the site as well. Now, most of the sites in Chillicothe, these monumental earthworks, what they found was that there was not habitation inside of the earthworks, but there was habitation outside and near and around them. The Hopewell Mound Group is one that's an exception. They have found signs of habitation inside of the enclosed site. And this site has the largest quantity of fine Hopewell artifacts, and we'll show some pictures of those. Now near the Hopewell Mound Group is the Mound City site. That's where the visitor center is for the National Park, has a Hopewell Cultural Center there. This picture at the bottom is only like a part of Mound City. So Mound City is 13 acres. So this is like a handful of acres with a few of the mounds. Just to give you an idea, this is a small fraction of how big the sites really are. Now the Chillicothe area is really amazing. It's kind of a center for this group of Native Americans that were living in the time frame of the Book of Mormon. This is the key central site where you see by far the most artifacts and leftovers. And so what these show is along the Scioto River that flows along Chillicothe. This is sort of about a 12-mile stretch. There are a number of huge monumental earthworks. And when I say huge, I mean huge. Most of these are 80 to 100 acres each within a mile or two of each other. And they go all up along this river and then all out this Paint Creek Valley. There's a valley to the left of the river, and then there's a north-south valley along the Scioto River. The Hopewell Mound Group, this is a 130-acre site, one of them. Mound City Group, a 13-acre site. And then there's a number of these sort of geometric earthwork sites, which appeared to be some kind of ceremonial centers or gathering centers, assembly areas, whatever it is you call them. The question is why would there be such huge sites so close together? This one here, Spruce Hill, is a hilltop, relatively flat hilltop with a wall around the edge, sort of like the Fort Ancient type, except the wall around the edge is made of piled stones and not as tall of a walls, but it's like several feet tall of piled stones all the way around, and that encompasses over 100 acres as well. Okay, so again, regarding cities, and my theory, so the typical consensus view is that these monumental geometric earthwork sites were all ceremonial gathering areas. And that it is true that, again, the habitation evidence are found not inside the sites, but out and around and near. So these sites do seem to have been sort of a dedicated space, whether it's an assembly area, ceremonial area, public area, whatever it is, but not for people to live there, with the one exception being the Hopewell Mound group, which showed signs of habitation in it. So the question is, why would you need so many of these when each one of them could have encompassed, several thousand people? Even if it's a ceremonial site, any one of these could have handled thousands of people. Just to give you an idea of how big they are, down on the right, an idea of like the Rice-Eccles Stadium, the University of Utah Stadium is only 5-something acres. Roman Coliseum is about 6 acres. Pyramid of Giza, 13 acres. Well, these are many times that. So you're talking about sites that are 20 times, 25 times the size of the Roman Coliseum or the University of Utah football stadium. Why would they need so many of these so near to each other, especially when some of them are they're just similar geometric earthwork sites? And my theory is that it implies a potentially extremely large population in the hundreds of thousands. But anyway, that's my interpretation there. Okay, so just a question of what is a city? There is, as I indicated, evidence of habitation around these. Scientists avoid using the word cities. There are some that acknowledge these as what they call a polity. Polity just means an identifiable organized society or political entity. But in my view, it's essentially semantics, because what you do see up and down these is a large population that it's just a little bit more spread out, and it was located around the earthworks, not in the earthworks. What I think you really had is up and down the Scioto River Valley in this Chillicothe area, many, many people up and down this valley, and then out the Paint Creek Valley, with each of these sites, these earthwork sites, being gathering areas or ceremonial areas of some sort. It is clear from the archaeological evidence that people were gathered around, was relatively spread out. They would have, it looks like they mostly had their own gardens and lived in family sort of units. So it's not like a dense city by any means. Okay, and then one other thing, in that Hopewell Mound group, that enclosed site, there was one of the mounds in there was interesting. When they dug into it, they found thousands and thousands of these kinds of rocks, palm-sized flint rocks. Can't remember the other name of it, some kind of stone, but it's a type that you use to work into spears, arrows, axe blades, tools, but they were unworked. And they were organized in, it says they were kind of laid out in a herringbone fashion, very organized, separated by a fine sand, and then covered up. It's almost like, it looks like they were essentially stashing what they would need if they wanted to have turn them into weapons or tools later. The total weight of them was over 5 tons. There was over 9,000 of them. Down here is a sort of a picture of them when they were pulled out. Again, the idea of why would you need a cache of so many potential tools and weapons unless you had thousands of people that would be there that may need to use them. Okay, and then some artifacts from the site. Looks like I'm running out of time, but I think we'll be okay. Interesting faces in some of the effigies that you see. Some have a interesting normal Native American kind of look. You see there some appeared to they had some sort of tattooing for some. I thought this was a very interesting one because it looks like a, you know, if you're interested in Book of Mormon, almost looks like a Semitic nose and beard. You know, but and then some not. But a couple of the things that showed up there: a copper axe, copper breastplate. The pottery was a little distinct from the pottery that you found in some of the more southern sites, in that it had these kind of 4-stemmed bottom, which is unique for in terms of the pottery. They sourced things from all over North America, obsidian as far west as the Rocky Mountains, copper from the Great Lakes and Upper Peninsula of Michigan, stuff from the Gulf of Mexico. They're sourcing things from all over. This shows a little bit of some of the fine looking copper workings that were done there. This shows almost all of the fabrics are gone. So when they deteriorate and they're gone, with only a small exception or two. This was one where they found this sort of cloth with a geometric design. Here was, they found a piece of cloth that was stuck to, again, copper. They could see that it had some reddish and it looked like geometric designs. One of the effigies that was drawn showed like a wraparound skirt that was used. So it gives a little bit idea what they may have looked like there. I think I'll skip over this, but they're along the valley, on the prominent hilltop ridges, they found spots of large fires, which leads to the possibility of using fires as sort of a communication or a potential alarm system. Some of the spots the fires had gotten so hot that slag was created, which also creates the possibility of potentially a knowledgeable formation of slag. Rod Meldrum's group has also, they have things that they point to for possible iron at that time. And I'll let them present that. And then finally, with Chillicothe, comes from a Native American word meaning it's the principal place. And many of the old, this is from the 1700s, 1776, many of the old Native American trails coming from various other places center towards Chillicothe. And the Great Hopewell Road is from Newark, which is 60 miles northeast of Chillicothe. There's a very large earthwork there. And on the bottom side of it, there was parallel earthen, there were 3-foot high earthen banks, 200 feet apart, with the ground leveled between them. And it went on for miles until it was lost due to plowing. But when they've used LiDAR since, they've been able to show that this appears to have extended, and it was pointed in the direction of Chillicothe. So some are estimating that it could have gone an entire 60 miles long road between Newark and Chillicothe. And I think that's the last slide. Okay, it is. All right, so that is the presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you. Let's provide the opportunity, ladies and gentlemen. Here's a chance to get into some very interesting discussion.
I think there's several